Hello, hello, everybody. Thais Guy here. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. My partner is literally sitting in front of me, laughing at me. Is this funny? Is this funny, mister? Oh, look at that smile. I'm usually alone to record these beautiful podcasts, but now it seems like my partner is always home. Thank you, coronavirus. I guess that's... I can't tell yet if I should be grateful for Corona or not grateful for Corona. We'll see in a week or so who ends up continuing to survive in this household. Currently on day 10 of self-quarantine. California is in a stay-at-home call. So just, trying to figure out what normal life looks like in this kind of unprecedented time. But I come to you because this is the first episode of 2020 where I interview a guest. I've been really using Reclaim to share my own thoughts, but I just love Sarah and I love the work that she's doing, and I just got really excited at the possibility of interviewing her for the podcast, so I invited her on. So Sarah Anassori is a career and leadership coach, and she's the co-founder of the Women on Mission Leadership Circle. She is on a mission to guide the next wave of heart-centered leaders to step into work and a way of working that they were made for. She seamlessly unites her years of traditional business experience, growing multi-million-dollar brands as a marketing manager at a renowned global healthcare company, with her passion for mindfulness and meditation, personal growth, and authentic leadership, bringing a unique blend of strategy and spirituality to the field of coaching. Sarah's soulful and profoundly practical guidance aims not just to inspire people to step into their leadership, but to truly equip them to live and create from a deeply empowered state. Her clients have launched new companies, exited toxic work environments, negotiated significant raises and promotions, championed transformational change in their organization, entered into crucial conversations with company leadership, and landed their dream job. Most importantly, they reclaimed what they always knew on some quiet but deep level. I am worthy and deserving of my success, and I trust myself to be bold in my work and my life. Okay, first off, she used the word reclaim and worthiness in her bio, so clearly she's the right fit for Reclaim the Podcast. I'm really excited for you to hear Sarah and me's conversation. Wow, truly losing my English today. My partner's looking at me again, like, Thais, pull it in, get it together here. Really enjoy our conversation because, during this chaotic time, while things are feeling really uncertain, I think we are, on the one level, invited to really ground in what is certain and what is real and what is true for us. And also, in that space, give ourselves the capacity to also envision what life could be like and really sit with the possibility of what if life could really be fulfilling for me. And that is everything that Sarah talks about in this episode. So without further ado, let's bring Sarah on. Welcome to Reclaim, a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter. I am your host, Thais Sky, international speaker, teacher, and a certified life coach currently working to become a licensed psychotherapist in the state of California. Join me here every week as I offer thoughts and interviews on what it means to reclaim your humanness in this messy world. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to Reclaim the Podcast. You are literally my first guest of 2020. So quite an exciting thing we got going here.
Thank you for the invitation. I have been a big fan of your work and the podcast for a long time now. And so I feel quite excited to have this conversation with you.
Same. We've known each other since pretty much I moved to LA 5 years ago. So it's been so great to see you on your journey, and we're living in really weird times. And I just want to start by naming that. I'm on day 10. I don't know when the day count start for people, but I'm just counting for when I started self-quarantining, which was 10 days ago. And it's a wild thing.
It is. I don't even know what day I'm on. I work from home, and my husband sometimes works from home and sometimes doesn't. So it was a weird feeling because our routine, it's like everything changed, and in some ways nothing changed physically for us.
Yeah.
And I just want to honor everyone in this moment who is feeling whatever they're feeling, whose circumstances have changed in whatever way they have, the conversations I've been having with clients and friends and family is we don't know how we feel yet.
Right. Yeah.
Cleo Wade just released part of a poem that she's working on, and it's called Before These. And she says, "You ask me how I am doing. I say fine. I'm not fine. I am feeling 1,000,000 different things all at once." Mm-hmm. And I think that's so true for so many of us.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part, okay, so there are many really hard parts about this, but one of the parts that I'm noticing for myself right now, and I'm seeing a lot of people are also kind of at that space, is like, okay, we're in this week 1, we're kind of finding a new normal. And like that new normal can only last for so long, like if this goes a month, okay, we'll be fine. If this goes 2 months, okay, we'll be fine. But if it starts going longer than 2 months, things are going to start breaking down. Things are going to start cracking. Things are not going to continue to be maintained the way it is. And that's really scary for people to not know how long this is going to be going for.
And I think for all of us to recognize, for some people that has already happened, depending on your socioeconomic status, the jobs that you were employed in before, your family situation. Some people are feeling that as of this week.
Yeah.
Some people won't, as you're saying, will feel it 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Maybe for some, it won't even be until a year from now. And uncertainty is something we struggle with when things feel fairly certain, right? We'll find the places in our life where we're like, wait, something doesn't feel quite stable, or it's stable, but our mind will jump to the future. So I think we're all familiar with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say most of us are not actually highly skilled at being and playing in that space, whether it's imagined or very much real.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been working on is, I feel like I've developed such a strong mindset over the years, really developing a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset and moving into solutions and action. And what I realized this week is I was doing that so quickly, but my emotions and my body hadn't caught up with my mind.
Yeah.
And so I was forced to really slow down and breathe and come back into my body and like let myself move and vocalize and sigh and cry and just plant myself in the present moment and just feel, without even naming the feelings, what was inside of me on some level, even if it wasn't, where my thoughts were at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I think that's really real. I think so many of us, our mind can move so much more quicker than our body and our emotions. And I think that often creates a battle within ourselves of like, but my mind is already here. And so giving ourselves space to really ground in our bodies and honor that, sometimes it takes a little bit for our emotions to catch up. And so giving ourselves space to let that catch up happen is a really important part of the process.
And that it'll happen in waves. I caught myself yesterday being like, how come I'm not back into creative mode? Like I went into hyperdrive solutions, checking with clients, friends, family. I'm in the middle of a launch, reevaluating that. So I was like very much in my mind. Then I dove into my emotions and, I was like, well, I'm going to give myself the space to do this. So Monday I can come back strong and clear, hit the ground running. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's totally here yet.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us who are quote unquote in like relative safety in this moment, there's such opportunity for us to use this time wisely and in a productive, creative manner. And also like we have to be really patient with ourselves in terms of how that happens over time. And knowing that it's not going to be a straight line, one day we may be really in our emotions based on a conversation we had with a family member, news we got about our job, our children acting up, whatever it may be. So again, I feel like there's just this permission we need to be giving ourselves and each other of like, these are not normal times. We are living with a lot of change and I get to be real about where I am in any given moment. And for me, that's challenging to do.
Yes, for me as well. And I decided to do a social media hiatus right before kind of everything went the way. I mean, people have been tracking this for a long time. So it's very privileged, right, from my position to be like, I wasn't even bothered by this until literally 2 weeks ago. But, to go on a social media hiatus. And then I will occasionally, I'm still on Facebook because I'm, in my Worthy Women Rise groups. And so I'm still seeing what some people are saying. And there's a lot of people out there saying, like, use this time, be creative, fill it with all of the stuff. Like, this is the opportunity to do movement from home. And this is the time to, and I just see all these leaders rally and kind of galvanize and support people. And I'm here like, no, I'm still really good at just being with my groups, being with my one-on-one clients, and tending to my very, very tender heart right now. And so noticing, I'm sure for you as well, like the tides, the waves of like wanting to support other people in a bigger way through social media, et cetera. And then also needing that our own space to do our own work and not necessarily feel like we have to show up just because everyone else is showing up in that way.
Yes, I so hear you. My first reaction, again, I went into like, okay, this is really hard for so many people. And I am in a privileged space where it's actually practically not that hard for me, at least not yet. And so I actually went into sort of like that, okay, I am a leader who can speak from a grounded space at this moment, and I can inspire other people who do have that level of safety and space actually now to get quiet, to do some of the inner work, to show up for our communities, to really evaluate, what am I doing? I think crises bring that reflection up for us. And I wanted to point out to people and to myself, like, this is not a moment to be wasted. And literally a day or two later, I was like, I can't show up to serve today and now I'm in a different space personally.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think just giving ourselves grace to like get it wrong or for it to change.
Yes.
I think the most important thing is, and my coach shared this with me, she's like, the guidance she was getting was go in and stay in. And when you can come out in a really grounded, locked in, aligned place, then share. But until that lock in and reintegration happens, use the time to be inward. Again, that's such an interesting piece of this moment, is for so many people, they have to go out even more powerfully than they ever have, from our grocery clerks to healthcare practitioners. My mailman, every day, I'm like, I can't believe he's doing the work that he's doing. So many people are, staying outward in a hard moment. And so many people have literally been quarantined and are so inward. And so how do we get really clear in any given day, where am I? And how can I be using this time, and what is needed? And can I slow down? Like, I think I had a big judgment of, I should be helping more. I should be outward facing more. And this idea of, I can go in and I can read and I can take some of the classes I've been wanting to take, and I can refine some of my teachings. To me, that felt almost inappropriate because it feels like such a time to like rally and go forward. So in my opinion, there's no right answer, and it will change so much for each of us on any given day, and especially as this progresses in the next few months.
I really appreciate you being so vulnerable in your own process. And I actually really love that pushing out and going inward kind of visual. And I think even those of us who are pushing out and pushing hard because they have to for survival reasons, there can always be even a moment of space to go inward, right? And for those of us who are in that inward state right now, there is also an outward desire for connection, and we can't self-isolate. That kills the soul. And so finding ways to not use this time to, yes, we have to physically distance, but maybe not emotionally distance, maybe not socially distance, in the words of, I use that social in quotes, right? Because I don't like that we're calling it social distancing. We need to be more connected than ever because we're removing that physical element of it. And so I also want to name, that we had a discussion. Oh no, I'm coughing. Oh God forbid. That we were talking about what we wanted to discuss on the podcast because, you have this tremendous expertise in the world of career and purpose. And is it the right time to be having this conversation right now? And I actually think it is very much the right time. And you agreed. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation because, well, I would love to hear a little bit more from you about it. But my thoughts of this are, right now, so many of us are at a point of thinking about, wait, is this really what I want to be even doing now that I have this space to be doing it from home, right? And like, is this even, because it's such a shift for so many people, I imagine that in that shift, there's an opening to question. And I wonder if that's what you've seen to be true for you and like what your thoughts are around it.
From the conversations I've been having thus far, I think we're in a moment of settling. So I don't think the questioning has emerged yet from the space of creation. The questioning I'm seeing happening is more from that uncertainty and questioning of stability. Now, I don't think that will last. And I also think, again, everyone is in a different situation, both, practically and mentally and spiritually and emotionally. But I do think, before, if I rewind a month ago, the conversations I was having, and honestly I've been having for 4 years now, is I really believe that I should be spending my time and energy in a meaningful way. And every person who comes to work with me around career transition is saying, I'm not sure this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to make sure that I'm being intentional with myself as a resource and a contributor to society. And the criteria people are looking for is what I would say is just deep fulfillment. And that comes from feeling connected to the work that you're doing, understanding that you're making a meaningful, important impact, feeling acknowledged for the work that you put in, being part of teams that are collaborative, being developed and constantly growing. I mean, I think most professionals, those are sort of the table stakes of what we deeply want. And many of us are not feeling that right now. And it's because, not for everyone, but I would say a significant portion of people, we've sort of defaulted into a job and a career. I remember being in pre-college, going to my dad's office in tears. My mom brought me to him. She said, Sarah is trying to figure out what major she needs to select because her university is telling her before she even starts, she needs to declare. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've never had this conversation with myself. And I knew work was so important. And I felt like I had to just choose. And no one had given me any guidance on how to do that. And so bless my dad, the way that he helped me work through it is we literally looked at a drop down and he said, do you want to be a doctor? I said, no. He said, do you want to be a lawyer? I said, no. Engineer? No. And so I literally defaulted into business because I was good at organization. And, so then I studied business and marketing. And then I defaulted based on the companies that were recruiting at my particular university. And then I got on a track there and stayed on it for 7 years. And I think, many of us have sort of landed somewhere.
Yeah.
And we were making these major decisions at such an early age. Yes. And so many of us, unless life forces us to, or our soul calls us strongly enough to a change, we don't look at it again.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a time, especially with people having more space up until now, and more privilege in a lot of ways to like ask these higher order questions of ourselves. Where we get stuck is we ask the existential question, what is my purpose? And we go really big, and we don't have a way to break that question down in a strategic way. And so we, again, just get stuck.
Yeah.
But there is this but I know.
Yeah.
There's this knowing and this knowing and this knowing. And so even though we're in a very uncertain time, that knowing won't leave us alone.
Yeah.
Still, once we can kind of settle, I think it's going to come up in a big way for even more people now.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of that. As you were talking about your major, I just also remember having a judgment because I was similar to you. I declared my major as business. I didn't know what else to kind of declare. And I just remember meeting people who were undeclared and I judged them, as like, oh, you don't know. Oh, you're wasting your time,
Yes.
When honestly, I think that was the smartest thing they could have done is to have had that space to try a bunch of different things out before they had to, focus on one major. And I think that that's the way we see so much of career decisions now is it's either like, okay, I'm not happy being this, I'm going to be a lawyer, right? With very little in between of like, well, what about like a lot of little, what am I saying by no in between? No play, no curiosity, no exploration. It's just like, let's go from one to the other. And like, pigeonholing yourself back into another thing because that's what feels more comfortable than being in this kind of undeclarative state.
I totally hear. I was the same way. I was like, practical, let me get off my parents' bill, let me like advance, let me create this life. And I totally agree. So many of us, we defaulted in that. My guess is that the kids, the students who got to play had creative parents, or had parents who maybe chose too quickly and regretted it.
Right.
I think the whole system needs to shift in terms of how we select, because we're selecting into labels, right? We're selecting into these little boxes. And I have, I've been doing career transition work, and the way that work evolved. One is I had to go figure out what I wanted to do. I quit a corporate job of 7 years. I was a marketer. I was working for a major healthcare company. And finally, I just decided, like, no one's ever going to fire me from this job. I have to fire myself. And so I decided to leave and lived off savings and tried to explore what to do next, again, with very little resources. Tried a bunch of businesses, eventually came into coaching work. And what people were coming to me for was that same journey that I had been on, which was like, not this, now what? And so I've been supporting people in that. And what's evolved in the last couple of years is, we started with a lot of deep inner work and exploration, but I was getting them into a deep understanding of who they were and what they were great at. And then I was still presenting them almost with this like underwhelming checklist of how they could activate that.
Right.
And so what I'm realizing more and more now, and I just co-created a program called the Women on Mission Leadership Circle with a fellow career and leadership coaches, we're going about it all wrong. We need to actually start with impact.
Yeah.
Which is look at the world around us. What is happening that breaks our heart? What is life telling us are the most essential challenges that we all need to be solving together? And if we start with that outward gaze of what is primary right now, and I think women have that kind of instinctual nature, like we feel it in our bones almost. If we start from there and then work backwards into, well, then what is the next job or what is the next creation? We end up in a very different place.
Yeah.
And I think it is this balance of marrying, what are the world's deepest needs and what is my greatest pleasure? I can't remember who shared that paradigm. But I think it's the intersection of the two where we find the greatest fulfillment, because it's so needed and it is so a part of who we are. Part of why I love my work is I feel like I slapped the word coach over me. And because there's so much wiggle room in that particular label, all of me gets to serve, right? The part of me that is a meditation teacher, the part of me that had a very spiritual upbringing, the part of me that is a trained marketer and strategist, the part of me that loves to create communication, like all of me gets to be utilized. And I think that's also a component of what we're craving is we don't feel alive in our work if we're not pulling from all the gifts and skills that we have, versus a lot of jobs are created where you just get a piece of me.
Yeah.
And then I have to shut down the rest.
Right.
And that creates a lot of dissatisfaction for people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I remember, what was I saying? I talk a lot about productivity and the problems of our kind of obsessive capitalistic culture and our connection to worth and productivity. And I had written something along those lines on Instagram, and someone had commented that something about, I was writing about rest, and this person said something along the lines of, if we didn't have to work, nobody would work, and I remember reading that and coming to terms again and again, because I think we come to these terms over that our culture isn't set up for us to find what we thrive at and do that thing. And so in our culture, it makes a lot of sense that there's plenty of people who believe that if they didn't have to work, they wouldn't work because they just want to sit and not do anything. But I actually don't find that to be true of the human spirit. And it seems like you're in agreement with me.
We are compelled to evolve, to create, to serve. I mean, again, we're living in this dreamlike state right now, but the adaptability and the creation and the coming together that's happening in this moment, we're falling short in a lot of places, but there's there's such beauty happening in this very moment.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. I think part of where that statement may have come from him is his deep, I think people are tired.
Yes.
Like, I think on some, right, like you were saying, capitalistic culture and progress and like no seasonality to our world. It's just like constant. Everything is always on. I mean, people are tired.
Yes.
Like at a soul level, people are exhausted. And I think some of that comes from, again, the always on. I think it comes from being out of alignment. You know, I think it comes from not saying the thing we know needs to be said. I mean, there's so many levels to that. This is another vulnerable share, but I remember I had quit my job. I was going on a vacation that I had pre-planned before I left the company. And I was coming back from vacation. And I remember having a thought that was somewhere along the lines of like, well, I've had a great life, you know, like I've achieved, I've loved, I've traveled. I can just die now. And I mean, like looking back, I was like, ooh, but I really had that thought. And it wasn't, I think a lot of people can have that thought, but if I'm being honest, that wasn't coming from a place of like gratitude, you know, and surrender. It was like, I was tired and I had no idea how I was going to figure out what to do next, let alone execute it, because the way that I had been executing my life and my work was killing me. I mean, to some extent, I was probably had adrenal fatigue. I was constantly stressed. My relationships weren't deep because I was, you know, overly focused on work and achieving and, you know, trying to grasp at that sense of stability that I had always wanted and didn't feel as a little girl. So, you know, I think that people are tired. And so again, being in this moment where some of us cannot rest, but some of us can, like, know which category you're in and take a second to take advantage of that and get super curious. Where am I losing energy?
Yeah.
And journal and write it down, like become a detective of your own life. There's so many insights that we can have if we have enough of a pause to go in.
Right. Yeah. And I think that what's coming through from this pandemic is that the ways in which we have been living our lives has not really been grounded in the limitations of our earth, right? And the limitations of our body. You know, not saying that there was anything we could have done to maybe prevent this. I'm not going to even go there. I don't know. But it is certainly clear, you know, even talking about things like how much the pollution has decreased over certain countries that have decreased productivity. And, you know, I saw this meme that I thought was really funny. It was like, you know, climate change needs coronavirus's PR agent, you know?
Yes.
Because like while coronavirus is legitimately serious and needs to be treated with a lot of respect, et cetera, all that is true. And climate change is infinitesimally worse, like so much worse, right? So much worse. The repercussions of climate change has already impacted our planet in irreversible ways. And I think all of this is calling for us, like we need to be looking at how we structure our lives differently. And I think what the beautiful work that you do is that you're inviting people to take that moment to really also restructure how they see themselves in their work.
100%. I mean, I think my husband and I have been talking about having kids, and when you think about having kids, there's this added layer of responsibility that you feel, right? Like I'm like, as we were talking about, I'm like, can I even bring someone else into what is present right now? And, you know, it may just be to placate myself, but I was like, well, you can if you're actively showing up to create the world that they deserve to be living in 10 years from now, 20 years, that their kids deserve to be living in. And it, you know, I think there's a way to carry that feels heavy. And there's a way to carry that is like this deep fuel that people can really connect to. And whether you have kids or not, like, you know, who is it? I think it's a Native American group says like, we're borrowing the world from them, right? Like we're borrowing from their future. So like, let's show up. And I think that anytime we're in a crisis, we feel that pull of like, it's time to reset. It's time to reset. And then the crisis fades, right? The news cycle shifts and we all just let that go. And so I'm very interested for every person, and it will be different. Like, what is your why that is so compelling to you on a like visceral level that will keep you in pursuit of this refinement that we're talking about, on how we're spending our time and energy, on how we are distributing our skills and strengths. And again, not all of us, but for some of us, we've been placed in a random placement. And so it's a great time to check, is this work essential? Is this work deeply meaningful to me? And it's very scary to come up with the answer no, because we don't have a roadmap for where to go next. And so I really encourage people, it's okay to ask those big questions, be willing to be with them, to ask them. You don't have to make a drastic change today,
right?
But you can just start getting clearer and clearer and clearer. I think people get really overwhelmed, because we're like, okay, I'm here. And I actually, an example, right? I'm working at an apparel company, but I actually am seeing a need in my community around the educational system and how broken that is, and how, the rich neighborhood over here has all these resources and the one 2 miles away has none. Like, that's not okay. So how do I move from buying, being a buyer for a retailer to that? And then you shut down and you don't even start. But my encouragement for people is honor what you're seeing in your immediate purview, and don't discount yourself as someone who can be helping with that solution. And just know that it's okay that it doesn't happen overnight, but that it does need to happen. And a lot of us need to be calling ourselves up into that work. And it just starts with being willing enough to slow down and to question and to release any shame that shows up. Because I know for me, I felt a ton of shame around, not doing it faster, not even the work I do now. If I'm being honest, I question, because I'm like, is this the most potent way I could be using my time and my energy? And, I think that's created a shift for me recently where I'm like, I can't just do career transition. I have to do mission creation. I have to get as many people as possible on a mission that I believe is essential to the global healing needed right now. And that has taken my work to this whole other level. But I had to get honest that something wasn't working.
Right.
And it was working for a while. And then my understanding shifts. And so, we're all continuing to awaken at our own pace. And our job is to just keep looking and going, okay, what is life asking of me now? What is the next phase of this now? And that can be a nonlinear process.
Yeah. And following your joy, right? Like following the fact that like life is hard. We're not supposed to kind of be happy all the time. This chase for positivity is an illusion. We are allowed to have the full spectrum of the human experience. And if you're coming up again and again and again to this truth that you're not happy with what you do, then right there is a sign for you that there's an opportunity for something else. And that we get to find a corner of the world that feels right for us. That gets to be, our gift back to the world.
Absolutely. And I was talking to someone and I was like, we all hate the question, what do you do? Right? We have like a poor way to interact with each other. We're not that creative. So we're like, what's your name? What do you do? And people hate asking and answering that question. And I would love to live in a world a couple years from now where people don't ask that anymore. They say, hey, what's your mission? What do you care about? What's the impact that you're trying to create in the world? And how can I help?
Yeah.
Like what a rich conversation that can be, how exciting could that be? But it's a shift because we're used to, can I label you? How can I place you? How am I going to rank you? My point of, where you
How much money do you make?
All that stuff. It's a deconditioning that needs to happen. And I do want to speak to the person who's listening, who is in a helping function, who is actually like very well placed, because I think sometimes, you can be in these places that are really perfect, but there's still an opportunity to elevate and to evolve. So I remember I was reading a magazine highlighting stories of people who were sort of on purpose. And one of the women's stories, her name is Charlene Otley. She is a speech pathologist. And I mean, what a beautiful profession, right? Helping kids learn how to speak well. And she mentioned, like at some point I forgot why I was here, what brought me to this meaningful work in the first place. And she let that question stay open in a way that didn't freak her out,
Mm.
And she ended up looking around and saying, hey, these kids that are coming into my office, I can tell how they're advancing, and even just the starting point, they're coming into work with me, and how, their circumstances are different and they're ending up in a different place. And so she was recognizing, disadvantaged clients that she had. And she created a program that was based on a grant that allowed this extra training for all kids, regardless of what you could pay, to get that kind of support. And it created this renewed sense of connection to the work, this new vitality. So, for people who maybe have been in place and are in a good place, I just encourage you to challenge yourself to say, okay, and now, like what does the new impact look like? What am I seeing around me that is still off, that I can really address? And, I think about people who are in more traditional corporate settings. Like, you could work the wage gap from inside your organization, right? Imagine if you were the woman, a female director who said, I want to see every single person's salary in this whole company. And I want to know, based on race and gender. And I want us to have a very clear picture of what's not working. And I want us to create a plan to have wage, equality 2 years from now. Like, what a mission, right?
Yeah.
What a beautiful mission, wherever you are. So I think the more that we can get clearer about what it is that we're meant to create, whether that involves a traditional career change or not, it's just an important thing for us to start thinking about and really committing to.
I love it. Well, one of the transitions that people are undergoing right now due to COVID-19, right, is transitioning to working at home. Yes. Again, of course, not everybody, but a solid percentage of, the world right now is attempting to move towards remote work, which is really, I think, in some ways very frustrating that all this accessibility is available now, and like there's been people that's been asking for this due to various circumstances for a long time, and companies said, no, we can't make that happen. And of course, the people that tend to ask are the people that have, marginalized identities, stay at home, like single moms, for example, anyway. So I just want to name that it's kind of unfortunate that we've had to get into these circumstances in order for this to be available. And now this is not only available, but kind of mandated for most companies. And so, I would love to hear your thoughts on like, what, do you have thoughts on like what this transition can look like in a way that can be meaningful for people and not overwhelming for people?
Yeah. Well, I just want to underline your statement. I think a lot of, again, shifts into the right happen when something breaks down.
Yeah.
I completely agree that flexible work is so important. I work with so many women who are opting out of opportunities because they need and want the flexibility. So they're not choosing to level up, or they're not choosing to take some career progression because they want more flexibility. So I think we, whether it's gender, whether it is, again, socioeconomic status, health, there's so many people who have health issues who not having to commute would be a game changer, right? Let alone what that creates for our environment to have the break of, what if we all work from home on Fridays forever, just even the shift in CO2 just based on that. So I think that there's, I just want to underline the frustration. I think a lot of people have felt that. I continue to feel that. And let this be an example we keep getting to point to of like, hey, we made it happen then. How come we can't make this happen now? Use it as a way to challenge your organizations. Working from home is interesting. I used to work in a formal corporate setting, went in every single day, dressed up, wore the uncomfortable heels, all of that.
I chose flats, but yeah.
Good for you. I wish I had done that sooner. But I think it's a very different situation for people, whether or not they have kids in the household.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to honor all the parents who are trying to now do their full-time job and provide full-time childcare.
Fuck, man.
Woof.
That is no joke.
No joke. Those are 2 full-time jobs. And it matters, like the impact on the kids, like they can feel what's happening right now. They are in a transition more than we are in many ways. And so holding our attention on them, trying to figure out how to balance, w- lots of grace for everyone to do it imperfectly, but they matter right
Yeah.
now as much as your job does. So if you don't have kids in the house, and I think this applies to everyone, but just recognizing that, well, I think this is for everyone. Routine is important. I remember starting to work from home and I would get up and just start working in pajamas, and then it's like noon and I hadn't brushed my teeth. So I think that just from a basic routine standpoint, really treating it as if you're going to work. So get up, do your morning routines, you don't have to put your makeup on. I would totally cut that out, but really put something different on. Find a designated space for work. Because again, what can happen is your whole home can become the office.
Yeah.
And that is not necessarily a huge problem during work hours. It's a problem to disconnect from work and then kind of recreate the fact that you are now home and not quote unquote in the office. So as much as you can find a desk or a table or somewhere where you're like, okay, this is work. And here are the hours that I'm agreeing to work, and really creating those boundaries for yourself is important.
Yeah. One of the things that was really helpful for me as I transitioned from my own career into entrepreneurship also is at the end of the business day, the end of the day that I decided I wanted to stop working, whatever that looked like, is that I said a little prayer, to myself. I needed that because if I didn't, I would just have continued working just on my phone, So saying a little prayer, I trust that I did what was enough. And again, this is different as well because I was moving into entrepreneurship, which is its own transition out of itself. But, a little prayer, I did everything I could. I did the best I could. I trust that everything is going to work out and I'm going to shut down my work for the day. And so even for those of you listening, that prayer may not call to you, even just a little mantra or just a commitment to yourself, okay, I am now done work, so that now you can transition into home life, may feel as Sarah's saying, a way to kind of separate work from home.
Absolutely. Even just, depending on whatever your routine was at the office, I would replicate that. I know a lot of people kind of go back to their to-do list, decide what they're doing tomorrow, and then again, shut the laptop down, take a breath. And I highly recommend, especially for women, some of you may have heard this before, but while at work, most of us are operating more in our masculine. And when we come back into home life, it's a great opportunity for women to reinvite more of the feminine in. And that requires decompressing. And if you had a commute where that's where that happened and it's gone now, take your commute time, maybe it's
go to the car.
Go to the car.
Sit in your car.
Put your music on, if you can move your body, take some breaths, take your bra off, right? Change, what you're doing. And if, you're at home partnered and have kids, trade off, say, okay, I'll handle the kids for a little while. You go turn off and then we can switch or whatever it may be. Slightly different topic, but I know, and this is not true in every household, but women tend to take on more of the domestic responsibility, and many women are also working full time. So this is a beautiful opportunity, if the responsibility has been off in your relationship, to correct it, right? What does, the appropriate support system look like? Are the duties, evenly distributed or distributed in a way that everyone feels good about? Ask for help. Be really vocal about what you need right now. I think sometimes in relationships, we can expect the other person to know, but we are stuck together for better or worse right now. And so over communicating and giving yourself permission to really ask for help, it may have looked like that day you didn't do as much as they did, but mentally or emotionally something's going on for you. Just say, hey, I need 5 minutes. I need to go sit in the bathroom and meditate or whatever it is. Be really clear and tuned into what are my needs. And then be really willing to be uncomfortable to communicate those needs. But in the long run, it will help in creating this new routine and rebalancing.
One of the things that I struggled with when I started working from home, okay, slightly different again, because this is shifting into entrepreneurship, but a lot of people I felt weren't really respecting my time and weren't respecting that I'm actually am working, even though I'm on Facebook. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though the way, the platform in which my work is different, it's still work. And that was really hard for me because I also felt maybe my work wasn't valid, wasn't real, at the beginning, because I wasn't going to an office. There's a validity that comes with going to an office, having these colleagues, and suddenly I'm working from home. and working on projects that I want to work at. And so I had to determine my own boundaries. And so I say all that to say that working from home means that we now get to reevaluate what our boundaries are, especially if we're working from home with a partner who may also be working from home. Like maybe your partner loves every hour to get up from the computer and chat with you. And then you have that colleague that's coming to your desk, and like you have doors that, in your work so that people can't do that. And now you don't have these doors. So it's just something for you, your partner to be in communication with, and your children if they're old enough to understand. Of like, what are boundaries? What do boundaries look like for you in terms of work? Like maybe it means lunch together every day as like the one time, maybe that's new boundaries that you don't have, just thinking about how you want to structure your day and then communicating that with the people around you so that they can support you and you can support them.
100%. I work from a space in my house, and so my husband will come home and I'm like still working, but there's no door where
Yes.
I am. And so I had to be like, hey, I am at work still. I will tell you when I am done with work. So again, being really compassionate with the other person, because we're used to certain cues that maybe no longer exist at this time. So again, use your words.
Yeah.
I think the other piece too is, for those who are working from home and their work doesn't involve a lot of connection with people, or maybe it used to and now it doesn't anymore, give yourself permission again to like schedule a phone call in the middle of the day, to ask a coworker, hey, do you want to co-work on Zoom with me? It can, for some people, become quite isolating in this moment in time. And so, even beyond that tip, what I would say is check in at the end of the day. How did that go? How am I feeling? And maybe it's like, I feel really like my body feels really agitated. Well, why might that be? Oh, I've been sitting. I haven't been moving. I used to go to like meetings multiple times a day. So I had that natural trigger to get me up and going. Okay, tomorrow, every hour, I'm going to set an alarm to move my body for 5 minutes. Again, it may be, I feel like lonely. Great. Call someone. Maybe you would come home from work and you didn't want to talk to anyone before, and now you can't wait to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Give that to yourself. Again, like getting really intentional about personal check-ins right now is so important.
And I love all the pictures people are taking of like their virtual happy hours. And it's like, good for you, because when I worked a corporate job, I was not all connected to my coworkers in this way. But if you work in a company where you all want to spend more time together, then like a virtual happy hour is great. Or you can just grab your friends, and create virtual happy hours. And again, that's that emphasis on like, this is not social distancing, it's physical distancing. Yes. But it doesn't mean that we have to remove our capacity to be connected. And we actually need that more than ever, because, this is such an isolating experience, especially if you're single and you live at home and you don't see anybody. So we just want to be, what Sarah and I are encouraging is for all of you who are listening to just be mindful of, how much you're isolating and how much you're connecting, and just see if you can be attuned to that, because, we have to make adjustments if things aren't working.
Absolutely. And, the side effect of not doing that is how we show up in our relationships and in connection with people, which might be like, we're a little on edge, we're snippier than we usually are. Yeah. So this is, again, we can feel more relaxed because we're in our personal space. But I think that there is a big need to like keep up your morning routines, keep up your energy practices, make sure that you're doing movement and working out. Like those, they can feel unnecessary because there are other priorities right now, but this is a really important time to like sink into them even more deeply, because when you do have those interactions with people, we're all exchanging energy, and everyone is slightly on edge, whether they know it or not, because literally our nervous systems are sort of like recalibrating. So if you can be the person who is deeply grounded and can hold space for someone else, or not put the little zinger in that's going to like cause some chaos in the group, I think the better for all of us.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing all of your thoughts with us. Do you have any final words?
I mean, I'm just sending everyone so much love right now. Give yourself the opportunity to understand how you're feeling, and like that may take some time and that may shift, but just really staying deeply connected with self in a moment like this is so important.
Yeah.
And then for us, I think it is important to time travel a little bit at a moment like this. So, staying present in the present moment as much as possible. And every once in a while, like traveling to the future and traveling past the moment of this being in tremendous flux. Like there will be a moment where the dust settles. We will be in a new reality. So once we get there past the adaptation that needs to happen, what do you want that to look like? What do you want to be creating? What have you been learning in this moment that you want to make sure gets really grounded in the future, even if, physically things are not the same as they are right now. And then I think the last message is, you matter, and your time and your energy and your skills are so valuable. And so the more that we can all move into the right placement in this next chapter, the better. And the more that we can learn to unlock what is already within us, and really show up, I think, as revolutionary leaders is a huge opportunity each of us has. And so if you've been feeling a knowing or a call to be stepping into higher leadership, like honor that, get curious about what that could look like in the future, and use again the space that you might have in your life right now to begin that inquiry.
I love that. And I'll make sure to link all of your things so that people can learn more about you and your just gentle, loving energy that you're putting out here. And my final note for everybody is, for the love of all things good in the world, stay home. Please, like the longer people aren't staying home, the longer we have to go through this. And of course, there's a huge caveat of people that have to be at working. And I bow to you. I appreciate you. Thank you for continuing to keep this country going. We need you. We appreciate you. And for those of you who are just going out, frolicking in the sun, hanging out with people, like this is not okay. We all need to be acting as if everyone has corona and we have corona. That's how we need to be acting. Anyway, thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate you.
Same. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Reclaim the Podcast. This podcast represents the opinions of Thais Sky and her guests to the show. The content of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental disorder.